When an import-dependent country has a weak currency, there are bound to be increasing unemployment and escalating poverty. Now, such is the present case of Nigeria, with increasing appetite for important goods and dwindling price and volume of crude exports. Pressure on Naira remain high, leading to regular devaluation. Now, we're going to be, launching an interview with an economist, Dr. Suleiman Danusa, on Nigeria's economy, where he says low production in the economy is responsible for the steady decline of the nation's currency. Let's take a look.
We used to export. Gone were days when we were almost at the top 3 in the cocoa, palm oil, and all those exportable commodities around the world. And we used to earn so much from those. As a matter of fact, in the early 60s, 70s, the supply of foreign exchange was higher than the demand for foreign exchange in those days. So basically, therefore, supply aspect of generating the foreign exchange, it's what puts the currency of domestic currency strong. And over the years, you have seen what has happened. We have become more import dependent. We have also become a monoproduct economy where 90% of our foreign exchange earnings are from oil. And you know the vagaries, the instability, the volatility of the oil. Sometimes prices will come as low as 30, 20, and sometimes will go up. And obviously, it's affecting our this thing. If you look at our foreign exchange earnings in the past, you realize that we used to have surpluses over and above the demand. Now, again, what determines the value of a currency is also the demand side. In those days, I give you simple examples of education. How many Nigerians were actually going abroad to school? How many vis-a-vis what we have today? How much were we spending for educational payments and so on? The CBN says almost in the last 10 years, we probably have spent not less than about 28 to 30 billion US dollars on education. In the area of health, in the last 10 years, CBN data also shows that we have spent not less than 11, 12 or more billion US dollars, almost an average of $1 billion every year on health. So the more, and then of course, other travel allowances, etc., expatriates, professional, all those things that we spend on have grown, not only because of population growth, but because of dependence in so many things that are imported. Also, payment for imports, you can see how much billions we have as bills in importation. Now, the more, therefore, the demand, the more you import, the more, obviously, the price of the currency. If you consider Naira as a commodity, the more people seek out the Naira, the more, of course, the price of Naira will go up. And therefore, what needed to have happened is for us to really continue to strengthen our currency is where supply is aggressively pursued. We export more than we import. And of course, we diversify our economy as well as to have many sources of foreign exchange. We also ensure that a lot of the things that we import can be manufactured locally, and therefore retaining our foreign exchange, improving and increasing our foreign exchange reserve, having positive balance of payment, etc. Those will play. And then, of course, on the demand side, we also have to tame demand. For example, when Central Bank of Nigeria introduced the policy of eliminating 41 items from the funding, CBN foreign exchange funding, it's been on record that savings have been done. So our ability, our culture to to be able to manufacture or to produce some of these things is very important. If you look at in the 70s also, a lot of the cars that we ride in Nigeria, the Peugeot, the Volkswagen, etc., were at least put together in Nigeria. All right? The CKDs, etc., yes, are imported, but there are value additions, offer employment, etc. And for that reason, if you look at, compare what we expend foreign exchange on then on transportation vis-a-vis what we do, almost every car on the road today is imported. And all those things go to put a strain on our capacity and also, of course, our reserves, this thing. And if you look at the fact that the dwindling major source of our foreign exchange, which is from oil, you find the capacity that we have right now, we are not even meeting our OPEC quota. Of course, because of vandalization, because of threats, etc., and the corruption that are all in it. So basically, therefore, all these things have affected our value of, the value of Naira as at then and the value of Naira as at today. One other strand on why the value of Naira, the nostalgic value of Naira in the 70s, etc., is becoming a major reference point in history is the fact that the kinds of things that we have today about, we have subsidies, so much subsidies and so much Naira in circulation from sources that are not, can be explained economically, just like CBN, umbrella funding, etc., and so on, has made it so easy for the invasion in the area of demand for foreign exchange, either for round tripping or for flight of people's resources because of so much liquidity out of corruption and money laundering. All those kind of impact. So yes, in the early 70s, etc., supply was slightly more than the demand. We had a depressed demand, but over time we found that more demand and less of supply. And in the past, at least an attempt was made to diversify effectively the sources of earning foreign exchange. Exports was quite dynamic then, even if it is of primary commodities, etc. But if you look at what is happening today, most people are more relaxed, even though, of course, government is doing everything possible to incentivize export, etc. So it's an issue of demand and supply. And we have to either improve on one aspect, but it's always better to work on both. Increase supply, and then, of course, manage the demand very well.
Yeah. Talking about this issue of demand and supply, what would you made of the CBN interventions over the years?
Yeah.
Which obviously has not really helped the Naira.
Yeah. No, you see, if you go back to the early 70s, we had what they call exchange control. As at that time, between 1970-72 to 1986, pre-SAP, what used to happen, of course, we had more supply of foreign exchange vis-a-vis the demand. But so as at that time, central bank was controlling both the rate, I mean the rate of Naira dollar exchange, and based on whatever policy they want to promote. But of course, you know that the coming of SAP, Structural Adjustment Program in 1986, where the market forces were introduced, you start having that's the introduction of foreign exchange market. The introduction of foreign exchange market, that is FEM, F-E-M, was heralded a situation where foreign exchange started to be sold through auction, either Dutch auction or interbank sales of foreign exchange and so on. Different things were tried. But the essence is when CBN decides to peg the interest rate, and pegging means a fiat rate. And for you to do that, there are conditions. For you to say our rate is going to be 430 or 400 or 300, then you must be able to have the supply that can sustain the demand under that rate. Because if you don't have, then you are going to create another market. Because the more the demand, the more people really want to buy, even in black market outside that. And therefore, you will see the gap. The pressure now will be on you. It will affect the exchange rate that you have pegged, and it will also affect your reserve. Because at any point in time, if you want to keep it at 430, then you have to be resorting to your reserve to make up, and that's what central bank has always done. Now, of course, unless and until you improve on the supply, CBN will continue to have problems because it will diminish the reserve, and whatever policy things that CBN is going to introduce, like increase in interest rate, etc., and so will not have, because there is a relationship between not only money supply in the system, there is a relationship between the value of your exchange, of currency, and the level of inflation. Not only the local inflation, but even the inflation of the country of the standard currency of trade. Therefore, if, for example, over a 10-year period, the average inflation rate of the United States is, let's say, 2%, but the average inflation rate of Nigeria is 15% or 12%. Now, that gap, all right, should determine the difference in exchange rate. If the computation of that gap translates to an exchange rate that is lower than what it should be, given the gap in inflation between the currency of trade and your this thing, that means you are subsidizing the exchange rate. And if you do that, obviously people will go and buy from the black market because you don't have a realistic exchange rate. And because it is getting higher and higher, the supply, official supply is low, people will seek out exchange rate wherever it is. Then it will come back, prices will be higher, inflation will be higher, etc. So that is why at every point in time, you find that CBN has to now intervene. And one other reason is that CBN is always having to intervene from the only single source, which is obviously oil, is because we have not diversified our sources of foreign exchange. We have not really promoted not only diversification, but productivity of our economy. Because the more of goods that we produce here, the less of the need for foreign exchange to import them. To the extent that we import matches and all those things, it is to that extent that people will continue to look for. So the more we are able to satisfy demands from local production, the less we need foreign exchange, and the more we conserve our foreign exchange. So yes, the more we rely on mono-product source of foreign exchange, the more central bank attempts to peg exchange rate, the more obviously we create black market, and the more CBN is required from time to time to intervene, because the consequences of increase in foreign exchange is inflation, prices, and so on. You know what that does to the society, and especially in an environment where there is unemployment, it will cause crisis, it will cause insecurity, and therefore, unless we diversify these sources, unless we become more productive, we will just continue to be a fire extinguisher. Or CBN will continue to be a fire extinguisher as far as the exchange management policy is concerned.
That's a very interesting submission. You made mention of the standard currency of trade. In the 80s, Naira was, before early 80s rather, Naira was in high demand, one of the standard currency of trade at the time. Before, but it's a change now, when President Buhari, former head of state, and the head of state then, Muhammad Buhari, introduced what we call maybe, I don't know how to put it now, a change in Naira at the time that made some of the foreign countries to start losing faith in local currency. Will you attribute some of the problem we have from then till now as one of the reasons?
No. You see, our policy is very dynamic. And governments and countries make policies to satisfy their economic interests and national interests. And therefore, we have no...
What I'm trying to say,
yeah.
If you look at the US dollar, right from when it was introduced, it has remained a US dollar till today.
Yeah, yeah.
But in Africa, we've undergone so many transformation changes and all of that, that is making some of these countries to lose faith in our economy and in our currencies.
Well, I don't think the countries will just lose faith just because you have changed your Naira from maybe another name to another. The dollar has remained dollar, not because if they change the name, it will matter. What matters is what are the underlying framework for the economy? How productive is the economy? What is the earning capacity of the economy? Because today, America is an industrialized country. It is very advanced, even the provision of service and technology, etc. It offers employment. The economic policies are done to provide them competitive advantage over other economies, etc. And therefore, all those translate into because the currency of a country is a symbol of your might, industrially, economically, etc. It's not just so the fact that we have a fiat exchange tool doesn't mean the name of your country will just determine how competitive you are. So the Naira could have been the greatest country, one of those major currencies if we had backed up that Naira with a lot of productivity. We've backed up that Naira with earning capacity and diversification, because those are the things that really are the fulcrum of this thing. The reason why today we call ourselves the giant of Africa, etc., and so on, is because for so many decades we've enjoyed oil revenue, and then we have our earnings in oil revenue and the GDP, the highest GDP in Africa, etc., is because of our earning capacity from oil. Unfortunately, we didn't capitalize on that earning capacity to build up other sources of earning so that we can really become diversified and solid. And by that, our currency should have been currency of reference, even in Africa. We should be a hub for all African currencies. Because any currencies now should be benchmarking with Naira if we had done what we are supposed to do. But we didn't do it. Changing the name of a currency or changing whatever you want to do with the currency without really changing the fundamentals and working on the fundamentals that cannot see. Rwanda, Kenya, all those things are trying to change. Even Nigeria, you can see, if you look at our GDP table, you find that the services, telecommunication, etc., are beginning to change the dynamics in our GDP. Agric used to play dominant role. They are still playing dominant role. But the only problem is that we have not actually flogged the value propositions in the value chain of agriculture, which is our major area of comparative advantage. If we do that, then we begin to now say, yes, we don't only have a great country, we have a great economy, and we have a great currency. Happily, we have the African trade, this thing that is coming. And again, for us to take advantage of that, to earn more foreign exchange, we have to be productive, we have to diversify, we have to differentiate ourselves, and using the resources that we have, the right policies, etc., to make sure that we become the dominant and a hub for African trade. And if we do that, then our currency will become very strong and a reference point vis-a-vis other currencies of trade.